Okay, let's dive in. Something pretty big just happened in India's education scene.
Hmm.
On June 11th, just recently, NCERT announced this major overhaul, really a complete revamp, of the Grade 7 economics syllabus.
Yeah, it's not just tweaking around the edges, is it?
Not at all. This feels like it's fundamentally changing how literally millions of 12-year-olds are going to start thinking about economics.
And what's really interesting, I think, isn't just that they changed it, but the whole philosophy behind it. It feels like a real push to make economics education relevant for the 21st century.
Moving away from some of the older methods that felt a bit, well, maybe a little dry.
Dusty, perhaps. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's fair. Less theoretical, more grounded.
Right, Dusty works. So what we want to do in this deep dive is get past that headline news. We really want to unpack why they felt this overhaul was needed now.
Hmm.
And what exactly is new? What's different about this approach compared to before?
And crucially, why it matters, right? For these kids, obviously, but also for the bigger picture of economic understanding in India.
Exactly. We're aiming to find those key insights, the spirit behind this shift, and what its potential impact could be, not just reporting facts.
Making those sometimes complex economic ideas relatable, accessible for young minds. That seems to be the core goal.
Okay, so let's tackle that first big question then. Why now? Why this specific moment for such a fundamental change to how 12-year-olds learn economics?
Well, a lot of it traces back pretty directly to the National Education Policy 2020, the NEP.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, a huge theme in the NEP is shifting away from rote learning. The old model of just memorizing definitions and facts for exams.
Right, more about understanding concepts.
Exactly. The NEP really pushes for sparking curiosity, encouraging critical thinking, and what they call experiential learning, basically. Learning by doing, by experiencing.
So instead of memorizing what is demand, it's more like exploring why the price of, say, onion suddenly shoots up.
Precisely. The feeling was that the old syllabus, especially for younger kids, often made economics seem like this abstract thing disconnected from their actual lives. This revamp is trying to make it practical, relatable, and honestly just more interesting for them. I mean, think about it. Kids today, they're already dealing with virtual economies in games.
That's
They
true.
get that their pocket money isn't infinite, that they have to choose. They understand trade-offs instinctively.
Yeah, that's a great point. Deciding between buying that one cool toy or maybe, getting snacks for a few days, that's an economic decision right there.
It absolutely is. And this new syllabus seems designed to give them the language and the framework to understand those everyday choices in a more structured economic way.
So it bridges that gap between their lived experience and the academic subject.
That seems to be the core idea. And that leads to the next big question. How do you actually do that? How do you make economics engaging for a 12-year-old?
Okay, let's get into that. The specifics. What are the key changes? What makes this Grade VII syllabus feel so different?
I think the most striking change is the heavy focus on real-world economics right from the start.
Yeah.
They're kind of shifting away from beginning with maybe historical concepts like the barter system, which can feel a bit distant.
Right, like something from a history book.
Exactly. Instead, they're grounding the lessons in scenarios kids can immediately recognize and relate to.
Can you give an example? What would that look like in a classroom?
Okay, think about street food. A really common example they're using is exploring why pani puri might cost, say, double in Mumbai compared to their hometown.
Ah, okay. That's something kids would definitely notice.
And it's not just noting the price difference. It's digging into the why. What are the underlying economic reasons? Things like, rent for the stall, ingredient costs, labor, how much demand there is, all those factors.
So they're basically doing a mini analysis of the economics of their favorite snack. That's quite clever.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or another example, why do mangoes get super expensive when they're not in season?
Yeah.
It's teaching supply and demand, but through something tangible they experience, not just abstract graphs at first. Or maybe looking at how a farmer decides what crops to grow.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, thinking about market prices, maybe the weather forecast, the soil type, but framed as an economic decision-making process, not just geography.
And I saw that great example about parents haggling at the vegetable market, the sabzi mandi.
Yes, that economics in action right there. Informal, maybe, but it demonstrates negotiation, price discovery.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So real-world examples are key. What else is fundamentally new?
Another big piece is the introduction of basic financial literacy concepts this early.
Okay, that feels important.
Very. While saving is often part of family culture in India, formal learning about managing money, budgeting, needs versus wants. That often came much later, if at all.
And connecting it directly to their own pocket money, that seems like the perfect entry point.
Spot on. Helping them think about how to budget their allowance, really understand the difference between something they need versus something they just want.
And maybe, just maybe, helping them understand why parents sometimes say no to that extra ice cream or toy.
Huh, exactly. It's not personal, it's about limited resources, scarcity, competing demands.
Teaching economic principles through the tragedy of a denied treat. Love it. Are there other major themes?
Yes, sustainability is another really important thread they've woven in.
Ah, good. How does that connect?
Well, it's about recognizing that our economic choices have environmental consequences. Simple things, like choosing between a plastic bag or a cloth bag at the shop.
Right, that daily decision.
It encourages them to think beyond the immediate cost or convenience. What's the environmental footprint? It might even prompt thoughts about, the whole cycle of constantly wanting new things, the resources used, the waste generated.
Connecting individual consumption to larger systemic issues. That's powerful. It also sounds like they're simplifying the language quite a bit.
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
That's a very conscious effort, getting rid of the jargon,
Yeah.
using language that's accessible to a 12-year-old.
So complex terms like macroeconomics or GDP are out for now.
Definitely parked for much later grades, like Class 12. Here, the focus is on grasping the core ideas, the economic way of thinking, mainly through interaction.
So less defining terms, more actually doing economics.
Exactly. That's the vibe. They're building in lots of interactive activities, things like role-playing.
Like pretending to be a shopkeeper.
Yeah, maybe figuring out costs, setting prices, trying to make a profit, or class debates like how would you best spend a hypothetical 500 rupees to achieve different goals.
Okay, that sounds much more engaging.
The aim is to get them thinking, like economists identifying trade-offs, asking why, seeing the economic angle in everyday life, but without getting bogged down by intimidating terminology.
That hands-on, interactive approach makes so much more sense for this age. And I gather there's a strong emphasis on the Indian context, too.
Absolutely central. It's deliberately rooted in Farad. Examples are drawn from Indian markets, local agriculture, small businesses that kids might actually see.
Like studying a street vendor in Delhi, how they manage their costs and prices.
Precisely. Something visible, tangible. Or understanding how something like GST might affect the price of their favorite snacks, like chole bhature or samosas.
Making it as relatable as possible.
It integrates economics into their cultural and physical environment, making it immediately relevant, not some foreign concept.
Okay, so we've got a good handle on the what and the how. Let's circle back to the why. Why does this specific grade 7th change really matter in the grand scheme of things?
Well, I think this is where you see the broader ambition. Economics isn't just an academic subject, is it? It underpins so much of our daily lives.
True. Every time you buy something, save something.
Or even just understand why petrol prices are fluctuating. It's everywhere. So giving kids this foundational understanding early on equips them to navigate their world more effectively, more thoughtfully.
It's like giving them a lens to see the world through, a tool they'll use constantly.
Exactly. And again, it ties back beautifully to that NEP 2020 vision of holistic education. It's not just about knowledge for exams.
Right.
It's about developing critical thinking, problem-solving abilities, connecting learning to life. That old saying, teach them to fish. Well, here, the fish is financial literacy, economic reasoning.
And honestly, given how much economic discussion happens everywhere in India, family budgets, news debates, policy talk, imagine a generation coming up with a really solid, practical grounding from this age.
It could be genuinely transformative. And it's also key to see this Grade VII syllabus isn't happening in isolation.
Ah, right. Part of bigger picture.
Yes, NCERT is actually in the process of revamping all textbooks across all subjects and grades, aiming to finish by 2026. This is all being done in alignment with the new National Curriculum Framework for School Education, the NCFSE.
Which also emphasizes things like experiential learning, Indian knowledge systems, values.
Exactly. So this Grade VII economics piece is like a foundational building block. They're starting with these relatable, concrete concepts now.
So that later on, when students hit more complex topics like GDP, inflation, monetary policy, the role of the RBI,
They actually have the mental scaffolding, the real-world examples to make sense of it all. It's not just abstract theory dropped on them cold.
it's like training for a marathon, right? You start with shorter, manageable runs before tackling the long distances.
That's a great analogy, laying the groundwork systematically.
So tell me about the process behind creating this. It sounds like a huge undertaking. How did they go about it?
It certainly was. Not something done overnight. It involved quite a meticulous process,
Hmm.
lots of input from different experts, economists, sure, but also educators, child development specialists.
And teachers on the ground, parents.
Oh, yes, lots of feedback loops with teachers and parents were apparently crucial. They wanted to ensure the content was accurate, relevant, age-appropriate, and really embodied those NEP principles, less rote, more interaction, reflecting current realities.
Like maybe incorporating things like digital payments, which are so ubiquitous now for kids too.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example of a new reality that needs to be part of their economic understanding.
But
So the process was collaborative and iterative.
okay, so that's the design phase. What about the reception now that it's rolling out? What are you hearing from teachers, parents?
It seems to be, broadly speaking, cautious optimism. You hear stories, like from a teacher, Priya Sharma in Bengaluru, who mentioned her students are already asking sharper questions about local economics, like why bus fares went up. She hopes this syllabus gives them better tools to explore that.
That's promising.
And then you have parents, like Anil Kumar in Delhi, echoing that common parental hope
Mm-hmm.
that maybe, just maybe, their kids will finally grasp that money doesn't just magically appear.
Huh. The eternal hope. But surely, implementing such a big change across India, there must be challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Huge challenges. The diversity of India means implementation is never simple, while well-resourced urban schools might adapt relatively easily to interactive methods.
The situation in many rural or under-resourced schools could be very different.
Exactly. There are real concerns about basic infrastructure, teacher training, availability of even simple materials. I heard one story, maybe anecdotal but telling, of a teacher in Uttar Pradesh worried about just having enough chalk for kids to draw a pretend shop for role play.
Wow, that really grounds the discussion. It brings home the resource gap.
It does. Now, NCERT says they'll provide support teacher training modules, digital resources, and so on. But the big question always is, will that support reach every classroom effectively, especially those that need it most?
Right. The gap between policy promises and on-the-ground reality can be significant.
It's the perennial challenge.
Yeah.
And implementation isn't the only hurdle. There's also assessment.
How do you test this new approach?
Exactly. If you're moving away from rote memorization towards understanding, application, critical thinking,
Mm.
as the NEP encourages, how do you measure that effectively?
It's harder than grading a multiple-choice test on definitions.
Much harder.
Yeah.
How do you fairly assess learning shown through a role-play activity or a class discussion or a project analyzing local prices? It demands a big shift towards competency-based assessment.
I can see that. How do you grade the student who's brilliant at haggling in the role play versus the one who meticulously calculates potential profits? Both show economic understanding, but differently.
Precisely. It requires new assessment strategies, new skills for teachers too, focusing on evaluating the process of thinking and applying concepts, not just the final recalled answer.
So lots of potential, but also significant hurdles to overcome for this to truly succeed everywhere.
That sums it up pretty well.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive here, this grade 7th economics revamp,
Yeah.
it really does feel like a significant moment, doesn't it? Potentially quite impactful.
I think so, yes. By grounding economics in everyday life, bringing in financial literacy early, weaving in sustainability, focusing on critical thinking over rote learning, NCERT is genuinely trying to foster a generation that's more financially savvy, yes, but also more environmentally aware and just better equipped to analyze the economic currents shaping their world.
Planting seeds, really, for a more economically literate and perhaps more engaged citizenry down the line.
Definitely feels like the intention. And here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe ponder as you go about your day. What if one of these kids, learning economics by analyzing pani-puri prices or market haggling, grows up inspired? Maybe they figure out a truly innovative solution to a big economic challenge, like
Right.
making essential goods affordable for everyone.
That's a hopeful thought. Or perhaps more realistically,
Yes.
maybe they'll just get really good at understanding why their own pocket money disappears so fast and master the fine economic art of just blaming inflation for everything.
Huh. Well, there's certainly economic precedent for that. It's a classic for a reason.
Isn't it just? So maybe next time you're making one of those small, everyday economic choices, buying a coffee, choosing a brand, deciding whether to save or spend, just pause for a second. Think about the economics behind it. Because millions of Grade VII students in India are now starting to learn how to do exactly that.